It's straight talk with no chaser. It gives the people a voice, empowers you with a choice. She gives you straight talk with no chaser. 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 She provides a platform of growth and gives a dying people hope. She gives you straight talk, no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser.
Welcome to the Straight No Chaser Show on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio station. This is your host, Rhea Ray Harris, and I'm so grateful to be with everyone this evening. Tonight I have a mother-daughter duo.
Yes.
In law enforcement and in authorship.
Yes.
So to my direct left is Rose Brooks.
Hello.
And to her left is her daughter, Cierra Thurmon.
Yes, the one and only.
The one and only. Now, before we get into the books,
okay,
tell them what you do during the day, or you at night, technically.
Okay. During the day, I am a Cook County Adult Probation Officer. I work in the Domestic Violence Unit as a court liaison officer.
And Miss Cierra?
On midnights, unfortunately. So I get a little bit more time. I'm a police officer with the Cook County Sheriff's Police Department.
And actually, now, Cierra, your book is titled My Life, the One He Never Got to Witness. And Rose, your book is titled Secrets of an Abused Woman. But Rose's real story precedes yours as your mother.
That's
but
correct.
Your story was written first.
Correct.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, pretty much I was just journaling, trying to get some of those feelings out about how I grew up, in a single family household, not having my father around, and how that affected me. Pretty much raising my little brother while my mom worked 2 jobs. And after I told the story from my perspective, my mom said it inspired her to tell her story. So the two together is almost like a series. You get us both our perspectives.
It's actually a continuum, the way it reads, because your story explains, because of course I read Cierra's book first,
right?
But your story explains a lot of what went on in Cierra's book. So for those that are going to get the book after today, start with Rose's book and then go into Cierra's book. So Rose, let's talk about you first.
Okay.
You're not from Chicago. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Marianna, Arkansas.
And for those people that don't know anything about Arkansas but Pine Bluff, where is that?
We are about 20 minutes from Memphis, Tennessee, because some people are familiar with that. And I am 2 hours away from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where I went to college.
And outside of the 10 of y'all at your house, because you had 9 brothers and sisters.
Correct.
How many other people were in the town?
Probably about maybe 500.
We laugh about this at work all the time. Like, the little town, half of them were y'all.
Exactly.
Now, in the book, it talks about growing up in that environment and having that family structure.
Right.
And at a point, the sister is just over you, right? Deb? No. Deb, yes.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. What did you say?
Deb, she's actually 2 sisters.
She's 2 sisters over you. Is she the one that went away to college and had a little trouble?
Correct.
Okay. And that was what your mother decided, was like, well, since Deb messed it up, I guess you're not going away to school.
Exactly.
And you bucked the system and went anyway.
I did.
And for those of you who don't know, Rose and I have been working in the same office.
Wow.
20 years almost.
Yeah.
In IPS. So I know the book, but I knew her through the book before that. So when you went to UAPB, for those of you that don't know, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, despite your grandmother's wanting that, Was that your first real free? Because as the youngest of 10, how sheltered are you, honestly?
Well, we were very sheltered. For instance, my sister that's ahead of me, well, older than I am, so she's the second to the youngest. She finally was able to date. And even though I'm saying date is not like the way you guys see it in Illinois, my mom sit in the living room in between me and my boyfriend, who I was dating until they got tired of it.
And
But
then they
that's
stopped dating you.
right.
And they started dating somebody with a little easier
Run them
to
away
talk
real
to.
quick.
Exactly.
So when you went to UAPB, what did you experience?
The first thing I experienced was I realized just in talking with my friends that I was kind of, as they put it, wow, because it's kind of like when you are sheltered and then when you get out and you can do anything you want and you don't have to ask your parents, you kind of go, get a little wow.
overboard.
You go overboard, right? Because you want to do everything. So my friends, my girlfriends actually, and one of my girlfriends actually works at the probation department, Darnett Wallace. So Darnett and Terry was my best friends in college. And so they pretty much told me, like, look, you got to stop trying to date everybody. You got to slow down. You like out here. So it was them pulling me back. But the other things that they wasn't able to help me with was when I was out dating with somebody. They tried to tell me certain guys, oh, he don't really like you or this and that. But me being a woman, I'm like, no, he really like me. He told me. And then you'll find out months later that he also had a girlfriend right in his class. He was just,
Something
the extra.
to do at that time.
Exactly.
Okay. So after you graduated, what were your intentions?
My intentions were to go to law school and to become an attorney.
So you came to Chicago at that point because you had family here already, right?
I did. My auntie was here and my oldest brother.
Now, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but you
Mhm.
met Cierra's father, who you wound up marrying here.
Correct.
From that experience, when you see this gentleman, you quote unquote city slick at that time.
Correct.
So he was a nice guy.
That's what I thought.
And I remember reading in the book, but I already knew, like I said, you were basically almost being accosted by this kind of I hate to use the word bum, but
Yeah.
bum.
Yeah.
And Cierra's dad came to your aid.
Yes.
And that's how you started
Dating him. Yes.
And then you looked up, and were you pregnant?
I was.
And you were either going to get married or not have the baby.
That is correct.
Thank God, Cierra.
Oh my God, I was gonna be aborted. I never knew that. This is news to me. Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much told him because still having those Southern values, right? I knew that if I would have called home and told my mom that I was pregnant, even though I was grown and we're no longer in her home, it was going to be a problem. And I was afraid to do that. So I told at that time my boyfriend, we weren't even married at the time. I told him, I'm like, look, I can't have this baby because my mom, I can't call her and tell her that, right? So at that point, he was like, no, I'm gonna marry you. We're gonna get married. And that's how it happened. Within 6 months of dating him, I was on my way to Arkansas to get married.
And when you came back here, now married and pregnant and working, a little bit more about him than you knew initially.
Exactly. I found out that he had initially told me that he was a real estate agent. He was not. He was a drug dealer, and he began using his own products. And that's when the abuse came in to play. I came home one day, saw him at the table getting high. My apartment was loaded with his friends. They were all sitting around. Everybody was getting high. It was like a party that I wasn't invited to.
And at that moment, you had a clear understanding, okay, I've stepped into something beyond what I thought.
Correct. And I thought that because of how nice he was and how things had been going, that I could just talk to him. So I came in, when I came across this scene, And I'm like, look, I need to talk to you. What's going on up in here? And having a boisterous, I was like speaking out in front of his friends. He felt like, I dare you disrespect me. And that's when the abuse started. So that very day, he locked me in the room, slapped me a couple of times, and told me to basically stay the F in the room.
And how pregnant were you at that point?
I was 7 months pregnant.
Now Sierra shows up,
Hmm.
and actually, because I've seen the pictures of your dad, and I was like, yeah, that's that, yeah. Yeah, I know he didn't try to deny her because you look. I didn't see any of his female relatives, but
Hmm.
I'm sure if any of them resemble him, you look like them because you look like his family.
Spitting image.
So I was like, okay. So not much longer after that, you're pregnant again.
Correct. Because basically, when I came home, and you know how you do the 6-week checkup, so he wanted to have sex, and I was like, "Look, the doctor said no," and he basically said, "B, I'm your husband. Forget the doctor." And
That's how this has to go.
yeah, and he did what he did, and of course, when I went back for my 6-week checkup, I was pregnant.
And was he still using?
Yes, he was.
So let's skip ahead.
Hmm.
You're in the hospital. Where was Courtney?
Sierra was with my my mother-in-law.
Okay, with his mother.
Right.
You had Courtney, which was his son.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, some men get really excited when they have sons.
That is correct.
That's just like, ooh, the biggest thing ever. So he went home to celebrate.
Yes.
Let's go at that point. What happened?
Okay. He goes home to celebrate. I didn't get a call. My sister-in-law came into the hospital because back then you stayed in the hospital a few days when you had a child.
Yeah, those were the good old days.
So I was in the hospital, basically recovering. I was expecting him, waiting for him to come and pick me up, but instead his sister came into the hospital and she said to me, "Rose, we need to go to the police station." And I'm looking at her like, "What? What? Why?" And then she said, "Bill is gone." And I said, "Gone where?" I told him to bring, I'm going on and on. And she says, "No, Rose, he's gone." And by that time, when she said it the second time, the priest, who I know now as the priest, he stepped from behind her and said, "Let's pray." And then I'm looking at them like,
What are
"What?"
we praying for?
Right.
Still not understanding.
Right. And then she basically said to me, "No, he was killed last night. And they won't give us any information. And they'll only give it to the wife. And you need to come and identify his body."
Now, I'm going to jump to Sierra for one moment. Because of how young you were, do you actually have any memories of your father?
Not really.
You have pictures.
I have photos, and I vaguely remember the funeral. I recall everyone being dressed in all black, and I remember the repast because it was so much good food, and I was a greedy child, and I didn't know why it was so many people at the house, and why it was so much food, and why people were crying. But I just remember we had so much good food.
And as a child, that's one of those big important things on your
Right.
mind, a la Shawnee the grandbaby.
Right.
We were talking about her this morning, but that's another story. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
now he's gone.
Yes.
And not to tell everything, but the Chicago Police Department was found liable for his death.
Yes.
And when you sued them, the children received a stipend, correct?
That is correct.
You received a judgment, but we're not going to tell why you did not receive the judgment. You have to read the book for that.
Okay.
That we're going to read for the book. Let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm going to go to Sierra.
Okay.
What's the first consistent memories you have? Because, like you said, at the time that your father was killed, you were very young.
Right. As a little girl, I just remember it being always the three of us, me, my mom, and my little brother. And I remember my friends having fathers, and I remember me having uncles, and my pawpaw was my grandfather. But I was really like jealous and confused as to why my father wasn't in my life, my mom explained it, that he's in heaven. And every night I remember praying to God, just please bring my daddy back. Please bring my daddy back. And he never brought my daddy back. And as I got older, she explained more of the story to me. And that's kind of how I what brought the book to life almost, because it started out with me just journaling, trying to get my feelings out. It's in our just in our neighborhoods, in our communities, is so many people who grow up in a fatherless home, no matter what the circumstances. Maybe your dad's locked up, maybe your mom and dad don't get along and he chooses not to be a part of your life. It's other people who've been victim of the system. In this case, where my father was taken from me, he was killed by the Chicago police. Whatever the reason, whether it's your father or your mother, I believe that it's important for a child to have both parents. And when you don't, there's always a missing piece. So it goes back to just helping with the self-esteem issues I had growing up and things like that, and the relationship issues and problems with guys. And it all went back to my childhood.
People don't understand a lot of the time. I find that you may be 75 years old and still carrying baggage from when you were 9 and 10.
Yes.
Because if certain issues are not addressed
Mm-hmm.
to a point that it makes you have peace with it,
Exactly.
it still impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, transitioning between the books, I know there was a point that, Rose, you were dating a gentleman called, I go by his initials, JB. Do
Okay.
you remember JB?
Yes, I do. That was my dad.
Okay.
That's the only father I ever knew.
Because you were with him for some years, right?
Yes.
And again, to keep some of the book private until you buy the book, yes, buy it. There was, after some time, some problems with JB, not physically abusive towards you, but there was a separation, and you all again were left, you and Courtney were left without a
Without a
father
dad
figure.
again.
Yes.
And at that point, you kind of wrote
Yeah.
on your own.
Yeah. At that point, I was like, you know what? I done had basically, I felt two bad relationships where even though Johnny wasn't abusive or JB wasn't abusive, but the thing was, I knew other things that I wasn't even supposed to be around, that he was involved in, that it actually caused him to go off to jail. So I just was like, you know what? Let me just try to raise these kids myself.
And I know you have brothers and your father at the time who were involved, but they lived in Arkansas.
Right. And they would go down south every year until my son actually begged me not to settle. Because my dad was like, bring them on. They need to get some man, they need to have a man around them. And so that's what I did every year. Took them down south for the summer.
Cierra, was that enough?
No. But my grandfather was a major influence in my life. I'm very appreciative for the time I had with him. And I talk about him in the book as well.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely discuss him and the influence he had on my family and myself.
I want you to pick up where your mom left off.
Okay.
Once JB was gone, because I'm familiar with the neighborhood that you all lived in because I lived not far away. You all were in South Shore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are unfamiliar with South Shore, there are parts of South Shore that are referred to as Terror Town.
Yes.
Right.
So Terror Town is rough. You don't have that name for nothing.
Exactly.
So you were making strides to get out.
Yes.
So, Cierra, I remember reading in your book how your mother would say, we're moving, and then you wouldn't go anywhere.
Goodness. So it's such a disappointment. So every single year when we came back from down south, my mom would tell us, we're getting ready to move. I got us a house. So we were all excited. We would tell all our friends, we got the transfer. We're going to a house, getting out this apartment. We just thought we was moving on up. And every year it would be the deal fell through. And it got to a point where we didn't even want to tell anybody anymore. Nobody believed us, like, sure, you're moving. We know. And it just...
We'll see you in school though, next week. Yeah. We'll see you.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. And you don't realize that you're growing up in the hood until you get outside of that, until you experience something different. So for us, walking up and down the street, seeing blood on the ground, the gang territories. I dated a drug dealer. Glass everywhere, the corner stores, the liquor stores, broken windows in your school, the school books are ripped up. You don't realize that that's not normal until you experience something different. So once we finally moved to the suburbs,
And how old were you?
I was going into 8th grade.
And so Courtney was going into
7th.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we finally moved to the south suburbs. First, we were ecstatic. I finally had my own room. We were doing cartwheels in the house. We had green grass. Like, we had never seen grass. Now, the one thing we were upset about is that the corner store. There was no corner store. So, like, where the corner stores at? But other than that, going to school, and we were excited about, man, fresh paint. Things that kids probably would never even dream of, not having broken windows.
Mhm.
Our books aren't ripped up. We actually have computers in our classrooms. We were excited about that.
So once you got into the South Suburban School District, because I remember there were questions about how they would function academically.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes. And that was the sad part. Basically, they labeled them
Because they were coming from an inner
because
city
they was
Chicago
coming from the
school.
inner city. Yes.
And both you and Courtney tested extremely high.
Yes.
did,
They
and
made
we
them take
ended-
exams
yeah.
to get in the gifted classes, and then they still was questioning.
Yeah.
Once you were out in the South Suburbs, because I know you were working,
Mhm.
you were still with probation,
Right.
which is a little journey
Mm-hmm.
from where you live. You were still little mama at that point.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
brother to this day says he has 2 mamas.
And so you were in charge of the house until your mother got home. How tall are you?
I'm 5'11" in socks. Yeah. I put some heels on. That's over 6 feet.
In 8th
Easily.
grade, how tall were you?
About 5'10", 5'11". Pretty much been the same size my whole life.
So when did the sports come into play for you?
As soon as I went to the south suburbs, 8th grade, all the coaches at the school were looking at me just confused. Like, you don't play any sports? Like, none? Like, no. It was no sports for us to play in the city. I went to the boys' courts to watch them play. I was actually a cheerleader.
Right.
And I played double dutch all the time in the city. That was it. It was no sports for us. But I came to the south suburbs and they put me on everything. Volleyball, basketball, track. They put me in everything.
But you excelled in
Basketball. That's
So-
my love.
when you went to high school. Tell me about that experience of going to that summer program.
AAU. I had just started playing basketball a year prior. A friend from my team invited me out to AAU at Thornwood. Thornwood represent. Whoop, whoop. But I went to summer league and I just started playing with the girls. First, I sat on the bleachers. The coach invited me to come run through some drills. I started out on the sophomore team. I played 1 game with them, and they bumped me up to varsity
As a freshman.
And I was intimidated and I was scared. And I'm like, I just started playing. Like, are y'all sure y'all making the right decision? But I guess they just saw something in me and that I didn't see at the time.
And your mother was one of those, what do they call, helicopter moms? Your mother was a lunatic.
Well, you know what? My mom, wasn't even coming to the games at first.
Okay, because by the time we really knew, she was a lunatic.
Right.
But
Yeah,
because of the
actually
work
what
schedule?
happened was, I didn't realize how good she was. And one of the coaches came up to me one day and he was like, Miss Brooks, I never see you at any of her games. I was like, did she really play? And he was like, your daughter is real good. What are you doing? I need you to support her. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's what made me start going.
Oh my goodness.
I really didn't know she was that good.
And from that moment, she never missed a game. She
Right.
became my biggest fan, biggest supporter.
Mhm.
She got kicked out of several games.
That's what I remember. That's what I remember when
Yeah,
she
because they
was
used,
like,
she was playing center, and they used to always, I'd be like, that foul wasn't on her. It's the other girl, So that was always.
She got
issue.
ejected out the game quite a bit.
I
That's
did.
all right. That's all right because she
But
was
they
doing
knew.
her job.
They knew who I was.
They knew who you were for sure. Now, going through high school, being a baller, because you weren't just, like I said, it wasn't just that you were tall.
Right.
Because you were newspaper worthy.
Yes.
As a player. But there still wasn't a dad around.
Correct.
Do you feel that basketball filled some of that hole?
It did. I felt like it kept me focused with my academics as well as the sports. And I'm very grateful for the coaches I had in my life because you learn lessons on the court that you can utilize outside the court. You know what I'm saying? And the male coaches, I had female coaches as well, but the men coaches in particular, Mr. Russell, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
He really took me in as if I was his own child.
Now you went actually, and I remember there was a lot of ruckus about where were you going to go to college.
Yes.
And I'll never say you made a wrong choice because the path you chose got you where you are today. But I know looking back on it, if you knew then what you knew now, you would not have chosen Loyola.
That's correct.
Now, again, I'm not saying this is all book because I've known Rose, like I said, most of my adult life.
Right.
So we've talked about almost everything. You weren't trying to get away from the house. You weren't trying to get too far away from the house.
It was that because I felt like my whole life it's just been me, my brother, and my mama. They need me. If I leave them, I'm abandoning them. My mom, she's my biggest fan. She wants to still support me and come to the games. It wasn't until after I was out of college that she finally told me that she wanted me to make a different decision. And the whole time I was thinking that she wanted me to stay.
I tried to push out that nest.
Yes, she wasn't going. Yes, she did. But I do think that because you understood the dynamic of having a three-person unit with only one quote unquote parent,
right? That
you didn't want to make her feel unwanted, like girl, get out of here.
Right. I did.
Yeah.
So
she did the complete opposite.
Right. I think you held back on what you felt to let her make what you felt was her own decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you went to Loyola, and to not call names and not embarrass anyone, you didn't have necessarily the best coaching experience.
Not at all. I was recruited by some coaches who said I got the green light. And right before my freshman year, those coaches were fired. So now I was in a position where I was playing for a coach who didn't recruit me and wanted to pretty much change up my style of play. And we just butted heads and it just didn't work out.
And then down the road, you got injured.
Yes. I tore my ACL, and that was a game changer.
Yeah, because for those of you that don't know how serious that injury is, that's a serious injury.
It really is. And I worked my butt off, busted my butt to come back. And actually, I came back in like 6 or 7 months, which is actually too quick. It was a pretty quick recovery. And I ended up injuring myself again. I came back too soon. I wasn't 100%. Even though I was still able to perform and outperform most of the girls I went up against, I still wasn't 100%.
Let's talk about the tie-in, which is the basis of both of your books, which is you're having an abusive husband and you're, because of his being killed by CPD, not having him even as a father. When you got older and started to really seriously date, who did you come to that was a man to ask any questions?
There was no one to ask. All I could basically do is really look to my mom as an example. And I used to tell myself all the time, I don't want to make the same mistake she made when it came to dating and choosing men. Because I would see the guys she would pick and I wouldn't agree with most of them. But somehow, some way, I ended up in those same type of patterns and behaviors and finding myself attracted to those same bad boys. So I didn't have any guidance in that area, you know.
How did you get out? Because you did get out.
Oh yeah. One particular incident I recall, I was in high school. This guy told me he was in construction.
Mhm.
I later found out he was not a construction worker. He was
Is that
actually a
code for
drug dealer.
I'm saying, is that code for the
Yeah.
dope dealer? Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. But I was used to getting the money and the gifts, and my mom had dated some drug dealers, so I said, well,
It
it can't be that
all
bad.
Mhm.
And I remember one night I was knocked out. My mom kicked my door off the hinges, yelling at the top of her lungs, "Who is this boy? You can't date him. It's a wrap. Call him right now. I'm going to tell him." I was crying. So at that point, I was like, okay. I was upset with her at the time, but I understood it. She wanted better for me, and she knew what that could only lead, to some trouble,
Mhm.
and she wanted more. So
Let's fast forward to today. Now, secrets of an abused woman. What do you do at domestic violence court besides being a court liaison?
I'm the victims assistance officer.
Which let me testify is a job I could not do.
mhm.
Because honestly, a lot of the people that are victims, men and women, because there are men victims, for those that don't know, are emotionally draining.
Yeah.
They're
Mhm.
their situations are very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But Rose, you come at it from a perspective of someone who's already walked that walk.
Yes. And that makes it easier for me to talk to them because I've been there. I know that you already feel, that you're the worst person in the world. If you tell on this person, you don't want to get him in no trouble. You don't know if you're going to have a place to stay, or if he was living with you, whatever it was, he was contributing to you and your family, that's going to be gone. Now, what do I do? So basically, where I come in, I basically just tell them, like, look, you can do this on your own. If you're going to be with somebody who's going to abuse you, you might as well be doing it on your own. And that's kind of how I come to them. And then once I began talking to them, they can pick up. That's just like with anybody who, like, say, Sierra play basketball. If basketball terms are thrown around, she know what they're talking about. Same thing.
They know that she knows.
They know that I know what's going on when it comes to the abuse. I don't even necessarily have to tell them sometimes. They pick up on my language. They know that the talk I'm talking is the same talk that they used to get hearing. So it's easier for me to do it based on the fact that I have been through it.
Because after dealing with Billy and with JB, where was your self-esteem?
In the dumps. I mean, it took me getting arrested, getting caught up in the system that I worked in, for me to realize you can't be around these people.
And that you deserve more and better.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sierra.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's look at the path for you. Because, like you said, you were following some of the traits that you saw in your mother when she was younger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How did you, because I remember there was a newspaper article, I don't know if it's still on your wall, but it was a full page.
Yeah, I had quite a few of those. My mom, she still got them.
But I mean, this one, the picture, you look like you were like 20 feet tall. You know which one
I know which one.
And I mean, every time I used to see that, I was like, my goodness. But you've modeled.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You've done so many things. And having said that, what did you feel like your self-esteem was? Being a star baller, being a sought-after model, having an education, because you don't just have a bachelor's degree, you have a master's degree.
That's correct.
But what was your self-esteem level?
At the time growing up, I had really low self-esteem. But those things helped me kind of get out of that funk that I was in. And I told myself, if my mom can do it, I can do it. And I wanted to be an example, especially to young women out here that may be going through a similar situation, that you can rewrite your story. Yes, I grew up in a messed up neighborhood. Yes, drug addiction and alcoholism plagued, my household. Yes, my father was murdered. But that doesn't have to be your story. Despite where you come from, your circumstances, you can write your own story, and that doesn't have to,
It doesn't have to end bad.
Exactly. And you can, and just that changing that mindset, that helped tremendously. that I'm not a victim. I'm actually a survivor, an overcomer, and I can do anything I set my mind to.
Having said that, what is the name of the publishing company for these two books?
Written Ambition Publishing.
Who is the owner of Written Ambition
The founder
Publishing?
and CEO is Cierra Thurmon.
Now, I say that for a couple of reasons. Number one, why did you choose to start your own publishing company in conjunction with writing your debut novel, which is your autobiography?
I felt like it was important for me to tell my own story and to have full creative control over it. I didn't want someone else outside of my realm, my circle coming in trying to change up things. I knew that going the traditional publishing route, I wasn't gonna get no coins, no money. They're gonna take all your money, all your royalties. So I felt like if I was gonna do all the work, then I should see some of the benefits of that work. And I wanted to also help other aspiring writers who wants to tell their story be able to do so and not having hit them over the head with the cost. Very affordable.
Because you published not just your book, but your mom's book.
That's correct.
Now we're going to take a slight detour because Rose knows, because this pisses me off to infinity. You've done a lot of promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And you've put a lot of effort in promoting your book and your mom's book. You had spectacular book signings for the debuts, etc. But in your journey with this, has every other person you've worked with been scrupulous? We're not gonna call names. We're not gonna call names. Even though if it was me, I'd call your name. But be grateful it's not.
let's just say I've come across some challenges in some of the relationships I've had in trying to promote my business, my book. And no, everybody hasn't been on the up and up. We on straight talk, no chaser. So let's just keep it all the way real. Everyone hasn't been on the up and up. I've learned a lot of lessons, some very expensive lessons. And I have a class and I want to teach that course to other authors and other writers so they don't make those same mistakes.
The reason I bring this up is there's a lot of push for, each one, reach one, and everyone's support. And Rose will tell you, I am the queen of support.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see there are small businesses, and this is not an ethnicity issue, this is an issue of, are you going to be legitimate or not?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many instances where people that are coming out being honest, decent, being taken advantage of.
Yep.
In all realms of business.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what are some of the pitfalls you would advise, just a couple, for people to avoid, certain things to ask, certain things to check for when you're dealing with people, when you want to get out there and say, you know what, whatever your business is, you want to get it out. What do you need to listen for?
Well, if I could give advice to anyone who's trying to start up a business or possibly be an author or something like that, it would be, for now, especially at the beginning, keep it within your small circle. There's no need to include a lot of people. Whatever you have the tools, especially if you research and you do your work, you have the tools to make that successful. I feel like when you bring a lot of outsiders in with different opinions and these crazy price tags that comes along with it, you can easily get taken advantage of. So I would say, do the work, do your research, and you single-handedly, or if you got a teammate, y'all take care of it.
Okay.
It doesn't take, a lot of people. And I feel like when you bring too many people into it, that's when
it gets complicated.
Yeah, very.
For both of you, if there's anything you would go back and do differently, what would that be?
Well, for me, if I had to go back, I probably would have gotten married years ago. I actually thought that by me staying single, I was protecting my kids because I didn't after, you have a couple of bad relationships. My thing was, I don't want nobody coming in here. Their father's deceased. I don't want another man coming in here abusing them or doing something. I mean, because as you can see, my daughter, she's bigger than me. So I didn't want another man coming in. And then I guess working in the criminal justice system, when you see all of this stuff, I just didn't want it on us. But I think what I would have done differently is I definitely would have gotten married so that there would have been someone to raise them up who were there presently all the time. And I would have made sure I chose someone that was, worthy, and that
Somebody that was a husband and a father.
exactly.
Cierra, is there anything, now your life is a whole lot shorter than ours at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
But is there anything looking back that you would have done differently?
Actually, no, because I feel like the lessons that I learned, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I don't feel like I would be as strong as I am today if I didn't go through those things. And I feel like your story, it can inspire and help and encourage other people. So I really use it as like it's a testimony. My trials and tribulations ultimately became my testimony because where I am today. And I'm grateful for that.
I'm glad because she's not as old as we are. We're like, girl, if I could go back and switch up a couple of those things.
Right.
Ooh, child. Now, let's do this.
Okay.
Rose, is this a solo thing? You're never going to write again? Or
Oh, I've already have started writing another book.
now, is this also autobiographical or is this a different format?
It's pretty much autobiographical. I'm telling more about my life and different things. I kind of like that, where I'm on the path of telling the truth, because my truth may help somebody else.
Mhm.
So, but yeah.
Cierra, are you going to do more writing or are you going to do more publishing?
Both. I just recently released my audiobook, so I want to do different formats, and I'm working on film now. So I want the story to be a movie. And after I complete that, I also have a few clients that I'm working with publishing and things like that. I do want to write more books, but for right now, my focus is on strictly promoting and pushing this and letting it be as big as it can possibly be. And for me, the next route to go is visually with film.
For victims of domestic violence that don't necessarily want to come through the system and see us,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell them, Rose?
I would tell them that there are a lot of self-help groups that are out there, and I would give them information to contact them if they don't want to, turn the person in and get help or have them get help. That's what I would suggest, because you have Aunt Martha's, you have a Haymarket. It's a lot of different agencies that works on different levels that do work for drugs or maybe counts, but they also have a piece for the victims. And you don't necessarily, for the victims, have to go through the system. There are agencies that are out there that they can just go to and they will help them. A lot of your shelters as well have counseling sessions within the shelter, that because most of the people who end up leaving, believe it or not, it's probably about 70% of them is leaving because of abuse of some sort, whether they are being abused themselves or their children are being abused, but it's normally, that's the reason why they normally end up in a shelter. So shelters have started, Pacific Garden is one big, and that's not far from us, but they are one big on assisting women, getting counseling and getting help, because if you don't get yourself the help, you still end up dating guys who was just like the one who you may have gotten away from, this one who was abusing you, but we tend to go toward other men. Yes, that's similar to the one we were dealing with. So they definitely need that counseling, and it's out there.
Okay. Cierra, you were saying that you are basically expanding.
Yes.
If there is, and this is something that I told your mom when you first wrote this book, if there is a school or a youth program or a youth ministry that wants to bring you in, or for Rose, a woman's ministry or a women's group, how do they reach you?
Really accessible. CierraThurmon.com is my website, and that's CIERRATHURMAN, CierraThurmon.com. I can be reached by email, sierra.thurman@ymail, and all of my social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, is at Cierra Thurman.
Rose, give them your work number.
My work number is 312-325-9050.
I want you all to just take a moment and think, what's the last statement you want to make to the Straight No Chaser show viewers? What's the last thing you want them to know about you and about where you're going from here?
Thing that I would want them to know is I've been through this. I'm a survivor, and I'm willing to help anybody who call me or have anything that they need to get out or want to find out. That's what I would want them to know. It's just that you can come to me, you can call me. I'll be willing to help anybody.
And we're going to look for a book.
Absolutely.
Number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Cierra?
I would say, don't allow your past to dictate your future. Don't allow your circumstances to stop you from striving for more and for greatness. Don't fall into that victim mentality, and that you can and you will, if you believe, achieve anything you set your mind to.
And before I close out, let me say that the predominant theme here, and this is not to put the blame on anyone, this is just to make people more aware, men are important.
Yes.
And when I say men, I'm not talking about just a sperm donor, you just show up every now and then, but an active participant with the woman to show the children what a natural and decent marriage and relationship is between a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, to show children what your father is supposed to be, because there is now, I would say we're probably into the 3rd generation of children that a lot of them don't even know what a father does, don't even know what a husband does,
Don't know what it
because they
looks
haven't
like.
seen
Exactly.
that relationship. So I'm asking women to do one thing, and I'm asking men to do one thing, just one thing today. Women, evaluate who the dude is before you let him in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Make sure this is the type of man that you want to be around. And if you have children, you want your children to be around. And if you don't have children, that you would want to have children by. Because if not, you're walking into a situation that's already going to blow up on at some point. And for men, be honest with who and what you are. And if you're not ready for that type of role and responsibility, don't take it.
Yes.
Because a whole lot of problems come in when your expectation from the woman is something that you aren't really prepared to give as a man. And it's okay to not give it, but just be honest about it.
Right.
Right.
And with that, I thank both you, Rose and Sierra, for being on the Straight
Thank
No
you for
Chaser
having
show
us, Rita.
on intellectualradio.com and iHeartStation. And always dedicate yourself to the truth, no matter the cost. I'll see you next week. Be safe, everyone. Peace and blessings in the name.
It's Straight Talk with no chaser. It gives the people a voice, empowers you with a choice. She gives you straight talk, no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. She provides a platform of growth and gives the dying people hope. She gives you straight talk, no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser. Straight talk with no chaser.